Holy snikes, folks. Ubisoft is going to add an offline mode for the crew, too, in Motorfest. Yeah, folks, there's been a whole heck of a heap of people, and me included, very much against the Crew 1 not being playable whatsoever, because it was an online-only game with no offline mode. And from what I can tell, Ubisoft and Ivory Tower, the company that's made all the Crew games, still ain't doing anything about that. So, I mean, given the title of the video, no, they cannot be fully redeemed ever. If you can't play the original game in the series, can't be fully redeemed. But I will say that depending on how things go, there can be somewhat of a redemption arc, and I'll get into it. Mainly it is the crew oriented, but I'll mention a little bit more along the way. So yeah, let's get into it, folks. To begin with, I don't really think there's a whole heck of a heap of details yet, because frankly I haven't been following all that much yet, because I wasn't expecting it to happen. At the very least, we know that the Crew 2 and Motorfest will get an offline update for what it sounds like pretty soon, and that means that you can actually play it without there being an internet connection. And I would hope that means also without a Ubisoft account and without, theoretically, like PlayStation Network, Xbox, that sort of account. Either, theoretically. You could just get a disc, put it in, and then go and play it offline. That would be the best case scenario of how they do it, but I guess we'll see on that. At the very least, no matter what, it kind of redeems them a little bit in that we're getting an offline mode when they're still online. This shows right here that the fans are actually making an impact. If the fans did not have this much of a pushback on what happened with the crew, then we would have never got an offline mode when they're still online. Maybe we would have ended up getting an offline mode for one or both of Crew 2 and Motorfest after the online ended, but at no point, I really don't think it was Ubisoft ever truly expecting to add an offline when there was still online, because they want your data. I mean, that's just kind of straightforward for a lot of major companies now, probably the vast majority. The user is the product. I mean, obviously, the product they're playing is a product as well, but the users themselves are also a product, and the data that can then be sold for advertising and a whole heck of heap of shady things that's been documented much better by many other people. You know what I'm talking about there. Our data and our habits and all that are worth, sadly, a whole heck of a heap of companies, arguably more than the amount that we spend on the games themselves, because that's part of it too. Arguably, the main debate for the Crew 1 that should still be playable isn't even that the game is still super revolutionary, it still has a giant map. But, I mean, the game is kind of outdated, the gameplay itself is okay. I mean, many people's reviewed that more than anything, but arguably the main reason that there was a fight for this is because so many people put so much money into the game. A lot of people bought the initial game for $60, and then the Wild Run update, which was extremely popular. As for a big DLC to a game, it was probably up there, the most popular of any game ever. From how I remember, it was a $20 DLC, and the way that I did it is I found a discount at a local game store, and I was able to get the full game, and then with the Wild Run DLC for $50, somehow I remember it, in 2015? I don't know. Go back to look. The first video I had on my channel of it was within like a week of getting it, so go back and look. I think it was 2015. Anyway, the point being is it wasn't all that long after it came out. So, for a lot of people, that's already $80 there. I just got kind of lucky. And then there was a police update as well, calling all units. That was a fair bit of money as well. I can't remember how much because I didn't get it. And actually, at the time, Ubisoft had pretty good fanfare when that calling all units update came out, because they made it to where even people that didn't get the update could still use a fair bit of the game mode, because while they couldn't drive the cop cars themselves, they could be the outlaws running from the cops, whatever the name was, I can't really remember. But they could still play around half the game mode, and I did a fair bit of that. There's footage of that on the channel, like the probably most famous crew run clip that I have, and the one that starts out in the RIP to the crew video is me being the runner in the cop chase, and my motorcycle gets launched like literally 2 miles or something like that. But I mean, that's part of it too, as well, is that a lot of the reason that people want offline mode too is just so they can screw around with glitches and stuff too, so they can do the launches, so they can do the derpy stuff, so they can do the under the map stuff, because from how I understand it as well, if it's an offline update, then you can play it on any individual update of the game. For certain consoles, I think it is more complicated to do it on an individual update sort of thing, but as far as I understand it, there are ways to do it to where you can play on any individual update that you want. So if there happens to be, as the game released, or a particular update or whatever that's really glitchy, then you can mess around with it. It's one of the things I'm still even pretty sure of, like GT Sport or something like that. You're still kind of screwed on. From how I understand it, I don't know if we're absolutely sure, but with GT Sport, unless you have a completely modded, jailbroken PS4, you're kind of stuck with just playing the end update of the game. Like, it would be quite cool if you could go back to GT Sport and then play that one update where it was glitched and there was rain on each of the track. It wasn't raining, but there was rain on each of the track. The actual visuals weren't dangerous, but I mean, the physics were decently well, so you could run rain on whatever track you wanted, and that would be a genuine reason for people to go back and play the game now. I think people can still actually do that for having a jailbroken PS4, but I mean, given that there's so many games that still have online for PS4, for someone like me, it's not really worth it to jailbreak the PS4, because I mean, I still play GT7 and a whole heck of a heap of others on PS4. Maybe down the road I will, once all those online end, but for now, for someone like me, it ain't really worth it. But for the crew, and I think especially for PC, it is easier to do stuff like that. So you can go back and do the glitches and the derpiness and the under the map that existed throughout as well. And I mean, for someone like me, that's part of it as well. As you know, my channel, when it matters the game, I can do a whole heck of glitches and fun stuff in that too. And even of the very final update of the crew, a lot of those still existed. So again, Ubisoft can't really fully redeem themselves because they haven't saved the crew one, and it doesn't seem like they're at all ever planning to do that. Luckily, there does seem to be some mods that, like, if you do have a jailbroken PS4 or Xbox, and especially on PC, then you can do it. I have no idea about the Xbox 360 version of the crew. It still boggles my mind to this day that even exists. If you've never watched Xbox 360 footage of the crew, go do that. It's still insane that even existed. But anyway, now to, like I said, I mentioned it a bit. So here's the bit of mentioning other games. And so it's, I mean, Ubisoft makes a whole heck of a heap of games. A lot of the most popular games I have no interest whatsoever in playing. But there are some other Ubisoft games that I've played throughout time. Probably the most hours of any other Ubisoft game other than The Crew is probably Trackmania, and then Steep is up there as well. But Steep is an old game. I don't realistically think I'd play it at all that much more. But for Trackmania, there was Trackmania, where I guess still is. Yeah, I think it still has online. Trackmania Turbo, but that was actually part of PlayStation Plus. But other than that free weekend coming up with, spoiler alert, I'll do what I can with that. I don't exactly know what I can do with that, but I'll do what I can with that at the very least. There'll be some type of video with that. But anyway, other than that, I can't play the Turbo because I have it through PlayStation Plus. But there's also a new one as well, that, as far as I know, are online only as well. So, I mean, if there's enough good fanfare with Ubisoft doing this for the crew, then maybe they do it for Trackmanias or Steep of like what I play, or like a whole heck of a heap of other popular stuff like the Tom Clancy games or Assassin's Creed and stuff like that, and many others as well. Ubisoft is a giant company, like as a whole. They have a whole heck of a heap of franchises, so I wouldn't really expect them to do it for very many, if any, more than what they've already announced them to do. But I would say, even if they do it for any at all, which again, I'm not necessarily expecting it, but if they do, that's above and beyond of what they would have done without the fan feedbacking. It definitely is a redemption arc for the company if they do that for other games. I'm not saying they will, but it definitely would help if they do. For something like Trackmania, I mean, kind of straightforward. A lot of playing that game is to move up the leaderboards and all that sort of thing. But I mean, a game like Steep, I don't see any reason why just have it play offline. I think theoretically Steep would not be a game that completely ends when the online servers are shut down, but still, it would be nice if they go and have the fully offline where you don't need a Ubisoft account or anything like that. For it, because it's just open world, and you can explore the open world no matter what, even if there aren't leaderboards or whatever it may be. And there's a whole heck of a heap of open world Ubisoft games where that applies, so that would be nice too. And you could even look at it a little bit as maybe this expands beyond the Ubisoft umbrella. If there's enough good fanfare with having the offline mode well before the online ends with the crew games, maybe other racing games will see this, maybe other open world games will see this, maybe just gaming in general. Again, I'm not necessarily expecting it, but we will see. That could apply to pretty much any and everything. A racing game, like, probably not Gran Turismo, because their main argument for having it always online when there is still online. So there's no hackers, because straightforward, like Gran Turismo 5 had hackers. I documented that. I've done multiple videos on that through the year. That's just straightforward, and it's not nearly as bad now as it was. There's occasional iffy things, but it's not remotely as bad hacker-wise with Gran Turismo as it was in like GT5 and such. So I will give props to where it's due, is that it does seem to be doing something or another with that. But there could be some other games out there where it would make sense to have more offline gameplay. One of the most straightforward that has gotten gripes recently is Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown. The AI, from how it seems, kind of sucks in the game, but at the very least, because it's an open world game that has a fairly large map, especially because it's a successor to the Test Drive series, which is a lot of the point where those were to explore the open world map, that should definitely have an offline mode, because at the very least, then you can explore the open world map, and if you want to race the AI, do so. But I mean, the game itself doesn't seem to be the dandiest, but in general, people are on average enjoying the open world. So that game is one of the most straightforward examples of definitely having offline. Yeah, that means that you can't do the leaderboards, and then maybe there would be some awkwardness of actually saving progress and stuff, because I think a lot of like the speed traps and the in-game type, open service type things, I can't remember the exact term, live service, I think that's it. like things would probably be kind of an awkward implementation of it. But I mean, at the very least, for open world games, to me it seems straightforward. All open world games, there's at least some appeal to have it be offline only, and a whole heck of people racing games in there too, because some racing games it actually is decently fun to race the AI. So I mean, yeah, straightforward. That would be Redemption, and I mean for all games in general, if some other games look at it and see the good fanfare and do it themselves, it could be a bit of a redemption arc for gaming in general. But again, I'm not particularly expecting that. We'll see. Still pretty early on. I mean, the update still ain't even out yet. I mean, to kind of sum it up, if the update is really cotton picking good and they do it to where you can pretty much still have the full game other than competing with people online, and I mean, even to some extent, again, I'm not really expecting them to do it, but they could even implement an offline summit sort of a thing where you just have to get a certain amount of total points, like the way that all the summits have done it. I think even in the well, I'll say Crew 2 Onward. Maybe for some things Crew 1, but definitely Crew 2 Onward. For all events, they're points based. Like maybe something that as long as you get 1 million points for the summit itself is a platinum, 800,000 is gold, 600,000 is silver, 400,000 is bronze, or something along the lines of that. They could do offline summits, but I mean, at the very least, as long as you can do the open world race AI stuff like that, that's good. But also something that would be really cool if they implement that for me personally would really redeem the companies as well, is especially for the Crew 2 because it's done. They're not making much money off the game anymore, so it's more realistic that they would do it. And then also maybe for Motorfest, but I'm really not expecting them to do it anytime soon for Motorfest. But to me, it would make sense for them to go ahead and do it for the Crew 2. Would be make it to where in the offline mode you can still get the summit type of thing, exclusive cars, which again they could theoretically add an offline summit, but they could also do for summit type cars just add it in the offline dealerships as well. They could go both ways about it. They could, if they wanted to, but again I'm not really expecting, they could have offline summits where you could just go into the individual summit and do enough events to get platinum to then get that car. Or then you could buy it at an offline dealership that would cost a fair bit of money, but if you don't really feel like doing the events that summit, then you could do it that way too. Or you just have a whole heck of a heap of money because you played the game a lot, whatever. It might be that sort of. And also that can go for the vanity items, because sadly the way that the crew's done it, even in the Crew 1, although it wasn't very intrusive in the Crew 1, but especially for the Crew 2 Onward, they had the crew credits, which for a while in the Crew 2, it was okay. Not great, but it was okay. Getting the crew credits, it was pretty grindy, and it probably could have been implemented where it's easier to get it, but I mean, it was doable. They took that away at some point. I can't remember exactly when, but they made it to where you pretty much just had to buy the crew credits. I think maybe on occasional you get lucky in a summit would have it. But generally speaking, you had to use real money to buy the crew credit. So that's something they could do with vanity items as well that are exclusive to only the crew credits. I'll admit I don't know straightforward because a lot of, even the vast majority of vanity items I don't really care about. So maybe there are some that are, I'm not exactly sure. But vanity items that don't ever come up in the summit, which again, maybe all of them end up coming up in summits, I'm not 100% sure, but let's say just for argument's sake that they don't. For whatever ones that aren't ever in the summits, that make it to where either offline you can grind for crew credits, which again makes more sense to implement in the Crew 2. It'd be incredible if they do it for Motorfest, but I'm not realistically expecting it. But I don't see any reason why they couldn't go ahead and do it for the Crew 2, because the game's lifespan in terms of total updates and all that is over. But anyway, yeah, they can make it to where you can grind for the vanity items. And really, that can go for ones that are Summit exclusives as well, because like I'm talking about Summit exclusive cars, might as well do that with vanity items if they do. Do I realistically think I can do this? I'm leaning more towards no. I mean, especially because theoretically the Crew 2 still has at least 3 years of online left if they do it the same way that they did with Crew 1. And theoretically, it makes even more sense to have the Crew 2 have online even longer than 1, because I think they just had more total players playing it, and maybe even still do. I don't really know of the retention rate of the Crew 2, but I'm pretty sure in total sales, the Crew 2 had more than 1. And it's the final one with the full United States map. The Crew 2 is a lot different of a game to Motorfest than the Crew 2 is to the Crew 1. That's for sure, folks. So just in terms of it being quite a bit of a different total game, and especially map, it makes sense to keep the online more. But even still, whether you can cycle through and end up getting a lot of the Summit exclusive cards eventually, with the online and all that too, that still means that people would have to pay attention and then still just simply have the online connection and that sort of thing. It is nice that you don't need the PlayStation Plus, Xbox Live sort of thing to do the summits, but there's no reason why you should. Anyway, I don't really give them bonus points for that. It's just something of like, from how I understand it with Solar Crown, you have to have PlayStation Plus, Xbox Live, that sort of thing to even do it at all. So I take points away for Solar Crown with that, but I'm not going to add bonus points necessarily for Crew 2 and Motorfest. Just being able to do the summits without the PlayStation Plus. But the point being is, I don't necessarily think in the actual definition that you could call the Crew 2 and Motorfest downright fear of missing out, but it is fear of waiting a long time to get things. So especially, we're waiting a random amount of time and most likely long, because theoretically, because as far as I know, you can only look a few summits ahead. It could mean that like 4 summits ahead, oh, the thing that you're looking for is going to happen, or it could be like 40, you don't know. On average, it's going to be longer because there's a whole heck of heap of things in the game. But generally speaking, it's a good thing that there is a whole heck of heap of content. There is a whole heck of a heap of the cards that they've added at the time of vanity items and all that. But so it's not as much fear of missing out, it's the fear of waiting a long time, and eventually you might get to it, but still, at the very least for the Crew 2, it would be nice if they had offline ways to grind it. But at the very least, there is some redemption with Ubisoft, and that there is no way that without this fan feedback and all that, that they would have had the offline modes for Crew 2 and especially Motorfest. It's early. They would have waited for the online to end. Motorfest still probably has 6-7 years left of online, I would hope. So, I mean, it's honestly kind of insane that they're getting offline mode for Motorfest this quick. That's great. As long as there isn't any crazy hacking, but I wouldn't really think there would be. Maybe on PC, but I mean, maybe on PC it actually just ends up kind of fun. We'll see on that, but I'm not too worried about the hacking aspect. It's not nearly as straightforward a hacking in those type of games as it was something like Gran Turismo 5 or something. Not terribly worried about it. I mean, I guess we'll see. If it ends up that after these offline modes are implemented, that hacking runs extremely rampant and it becomes a terrible problem, maybe it's worth reassessing, but I'm not too worried about that. Yeah, I'll give the benefit of the doubt and say that won't be too big of an issue, but we'll see. Nonetheless, there is a bit of redemption that we're already getting the offline modes, because that would have never happened without the fan feedback. It's incredible that the fan feedback has been this big and it's making this big of a difference. It's actually more than I expected in both sides. Granted, to some extent, I did actually expect that Ubisoft would do something about the Group 1, and at the very least, make it to where you could at least free roam the map in offline, at the very least. Doesn't seem like they're planning to do that. So you could look at it both ways. In some ways, Ubisoft will never be fully redeemed. In some ways, they're going to be redeemed more than what was expected before as well. So there's some positives, there's some negatives. There'll never be complete positives or negatives. But nonetheless, in some ways, it's worth more of a yeehaw than I expected. And there's still a lot that we don't really know what's going to happen. It could be more or less than expected, hope for, however you want to word it there, depending on how much optimist, pessimist you are, or whatever it may be. So yeah, of course, we're still waiting on a lot of information. I mean, the updates themselves ain't even released yet, but I mean, even of what we know of Ubisoft, we still don't know for how other companies end up doing it, or even how other Ubisoft games end up doing it in future as well. Give it a benefit of the doubt and stay fairly positive about it, because the more that the fans stay positive about it and give feedback like we have been doing and it's been shown to be working, maybe, and it surely is a maybe, we don't know yet, maybe the more good things will happen, like other Ubisoft games get this offline sort of thing, or other games that are kind of in the same genre as the Crew 2 Motorfest and onward like that. We don't know. We didn't know how well this would work, and it ended up in some ways working quite dandy. So we don't know. The more positive we are about it, like we were before about the Crew 1, maybe, just maybe, things will work out in our favor. And if they do, and in some ways they already have, because again, with the offline update coming when they're still online, it's most certainly worth a yeehaw.